I want to make a very serious statement to kick off, and that's this. The education system in England is manifestly unfair. Why do I say that? Well, 1 in 3 young people from poor backgrounds are unable to read or write or solve a basic maths problem in primary school. If you come from a poor background, you are 4 times more likely to be permanently excluded from school compared to your wealthier peer. You are 2.5 times less likely to be admitted into a selective university. That is manifestly unfair. It affects those young people, their families, their communities. It also affects the economy. So what the Fair Education Alliance have been doing over the past few years is thinking deeply about how this inequality manifests itself. We can see the gap in primary attainment, primary school. We can see the gap in secondary attainment, in secondary school. There's a gap in terms of your likelihood of being in NEET, so not in education, employment, or training. There's also a gap in terms of access and graduation from university. But underlying all of those inequalities and gaps in the education system, we think there's something that if we get right, we can radically transform the life chances of young disadvantaged people across the country. And that's the development of key strengths, namely character, well-being, and strong mental health. Now, I want to focus specifically on character tonight. And I don't want to get into a discussion about what character means. We can have a debate outside of the pub afterwards. But there are some common themes that run through the idea of character that I think we can all agree on. So ambition, drive, your ability to stay the course, your grit, self-discipline, self-control. And I want to specifically focus on an intervention, an ingenious intervention, which is relatively new, but I think develops that character and is a powerful weapon in our nation's fight to try and make sure that every child has a fair shot at life and a fair education. And that's competitive debating. Now, the picture up here is actually when I was at school. This is my rival school across the road. We used to debate regularly. My teachers would kill me if they knew that I was promoting their school right now, but hey, ho, they can't get me. And this is them preparing for a debate. It's fantastically simple. You have 2 sides. You get allocated a topic, so you don't get to pick. And the topics can range from whether or not military intervention in Syria is justified or whether or not we should allow drugs in sport, fairly topical. And you are allocated the same amount of time to put forward your argument and respond to other people's arguments in front of a panel of judges. Very simple. But it's had a hugely transformative effect on the lives of lots of people across the world. I reached out to the global debating community to get a sense of how debating has helped people in their lives in education, to help them achieve what they want to achieve. I was inundated, and I can only do justice to a few of them. I got an email from a young woman from Berlin who said her family were a family of immigrants. And at school, she lacked self-esteem. She didn't feel like she fitted in. She didn't really know where she stood, not just in her school, but in life. And her teacher, a great teacher, suggested, you should take up debating. She did. And it transformed her life. She became more confident. She went around school with her head up high. And she succeeded. She got great grades, went to a great university, is now helping settle refugees in Germany. Fantastic story. I got an email from a young man in South Africa who, again, came from a underprivileged background. He said to me in the email that he had never met anyone outside of his social circle before. And yet, through debating, he was competing against, literally sitting at the table with, people who came from more privileged backgrounds than him, and it was beating them. And that gave him a huge confidence boost when he went to university, and it helped him stay the course at university. I got an email from a teacher in Ireland who said, well, my kids don't read. But as soon as they started doing debating and knew that they could get a competitive advantage by reading The Economist on a weekly basis, every Friday they kept on coming in and badgering me to ask me if I've read the latest article in The Economist on Japan, on Japanese economics. That's absolutely brilliant. Developing their literacy skills, a fantastic intervention. Some of you last year may have seen the fantastic story of a bunch of prisoners in America who managed to beat a little-known university called Harvard, right? That's not surprising. My good friend Mary Nugent was involved in that program. She wrote to me. She said, it's not surprising we have an intervention that helps instill discipline and self-control in young people and channel all that energy and frustration into something creative, but also disciplined. No surprise at all. And a story that will always live with me is someone who I helped mentor a few years ago, who was a former gang member. He himself had committed crimes like armed robbery. He spent time in a correctional facility. It was suggested by his teacher that he takes up debating, and his attendance at school jumped up. He got passionate about it, and a year of the London riots, he was asked by his mates to join in those riots. He said, nah, I'm prepping for my debate. I need to win this competition. And in that same year, instead of rioting, ended up debating for his school in the national finals at the House of Lords. From the House, to get to the House of Lords for being a former gang member. Incredible. And it's not just stories that back up this. There's also studies from America which show that if you look at, for example, the Chicago Urban Debate League, who look specifically at African-American males, debating improves their grade point average, it improves the likelihood of them graduating on time, improves their literacy. So it's a fantastic intervention that we need to spread to everyone, right? We need to make sure that every child in this country, especially from poor communities, has the ability to access not just things like debating, although it's fantastic, but things like youth social action, volunteering opportunities, music, drama, things that help develop and build character. And there's some fantastic organizations, I'm not going to name now, there's so many of them, providing fantastic opportunities to learn how to debate in some of our most underprivileged schools. But there are three challenges which I think you need to use that ingenuity that helped us create this intervention to get over. The first is data. We need to get better at using data when it comes to character in schools. How can we be sure what we're measuring is the right thing to measure? How can we track the development of pupils, not just from one year to another year, but across the education spectrum, the education life cycle of a child? The second is collaboration. These interventions mainly happen in places like London and Birmingham, Manchester. Fantastic places. I live in London, of course, I think it's pretty good. But there are lots of places where the education gap is stubbornly high. Coastal regions, former seaside towns, parts of the country where, unfortunately, they need more intervention. So how do we collaborate as third sector organizations, as a country, to make sure that all these regions get all the benefits that other parts of the country are currently getting? The final one is communication. I think some of you may have, before coming to this talk, or still maybe after this talk, think that it's a nice to have extra, being part of a debating club, but actually let's sort out the grades first. I think that's a false dichotomy. I think, and I hopefully have shown, that things like debating reinforce learning in the classroom. It's not a forced choice. If you do debating, there's a very good chance it will help your grades. So let's try and change the frame and the language and not set these up in conflicts, but actually show how they reinforce each other. Let's maybe, for example, not refer to these as soft skills, but skills. In the future, the jobs that are going to exist, the jobs which are going to be the most attractive ones, are the jobs which require skills like persuasion, skills like empathy, high EQ. So let's start that conversation now. So 3 challenges that we need to get over in order to make sure that every child has access to something like debating. Data, collaboration, communication. And I think there's an ask of everyone in this room. We are all connected to a school, either by being a parent or a school governor or living in an area where there's a school. So let's have a dialogue and let's enter into a dialogue with our schools. What are you doing to help develop the character of your young people? Do you have a debate club? I've heard it's a great thing. This guy called Lewis said it was brilliant. We should have one. But I want to leave you with one last thing. And I didn't plan to say this, but I think events over the last week or so has meant I think this is particularly poignant now in a world where wanton violence and people getting killed because of the people they love or because they were doing their democratic duty has hit us in the face pretty hard over the last few days. There's never been a more important time to be able to disagree without being disagreeable or even violent. So the idea of developing in young people the ability to debate without picking that side and force yourself to come up with arguments, have empathy for the other side opposite you, even if you have a different way of thinking about the world or a different idea about how the society you live in should be governed. being able to have that disagreement in an agreeable way, I think is incredible. So not only is debating something that can help close the education gap and unleash the potential of young people, all young people in our country, debating is also a tool that just makes our world a more pleasant place to live in. And I think, and I'm passionate about debating in schools, that's something that's worth fighting for. Thank you very much.